One easy way to avoid infectious diseases is to avoid the source of contamination. Choosing to live the life of a hermit on a rock in the middle of some far-off desert would drastically reduce your chances of infection. It would also hamper your social life. As you and I know, humans are highly social creatures and live in complex communities. It is this constant mixing of people that spread diseases so effectively. Any parent with a child in daycare or kindergarten is familiar with this simple process. As are college kids during the flu season or vacationers on cruise ships during a norovirus outbreak, where whole ships come down with infectious diarrhea and vomiting caused by a virus spectacularly well adapted to transmit in our high-density societies. If we cannot be hermits, are there any behaviours that can reduce transmission? This question has been considered by both Marcel and Rachel. Here I want to take a complementary approach and do as the Bible says, go to the ant and consider her ways. Can we look at other social groups like ants and ask how they use behaviour to combat disease? One society, the leaf-cutting ants, stands out because they possess a behaviour-driven healthcare system that is remarkably effective. These insects invented agriculture roughly 65 million years ago when they domesticated the mushroom, which they eat as their primary food source. To fuel the growth of this fungus, the worker ants gather leaves and carefully dice them up for the fungus to feed from. Relying on just one source of food is potentially hazardous, so to prevent infections for their food, these ants have become master gardeners, weeding and grooming their farms constantly. The worker ants check for infectious spores of a nasty fungus called Escovopsis and remove it immediately. They even evolved a relationship with bacteria that live on their skin and provide antibiotics on demand, which the ants use in their war on parasites. And when whole areas of their colony fall victim, the ants can wall off that part of the nest to leave their siblings to die, rather than risk that they transmit the infection to other parts of the colony. So, behaviours can be effective, but requires that the group acts cohesively. Sometimes, behavioural defence is something that an individual can do. A nice story is infection of bumblebees by a parasitic fly called a conopid. The inside of the hive is always warm and toasty, around 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which would increase the speed at which the parasite grows and how quickly the bee dies. To slow down the growth, the infected bee opts to spend lonely nights outside the hive as a behavioural defence to increase her life and her value to the colony. Others go further when looking for a cure. Baboons and other animals, even caterpillars and ants, are able to self-medicate. Baboons infected with gut parasites can collect certain plants which have nasty chemicals. By eating such poisonous plants, they reduce the burden of disease because the poisons kill their gut parasites. These behaviours kick in when an animal is already infected. As the famous maxim goes, prevention is better than cure, so can animals avoid the infection in the first place? This is what many grass-feeding herbivores do. As you can imagine, eating grass carries the risk of eating the end result of eating grass. So in response, grass eaters can be very choosy and avoid parasite-laden grass. It has even been shown that pregnant sheep avoid infected grass more, and that this avoidance is most pronounced in the first trimester of pregnancy, when the potential damage of infection on the developing fetus is greater. Sometimes the disease is not on the food, but in another animal of the same species, called a conspecific. Many social animals spend a lot of time with conspecifics, so recognizing when they are infected would be ideal. Beautiful work on the Caribbean spiny lobsters show how they avoid conspecifics that are infected with a lethal virus. Importantly, they do this even before the infected one is transmitting the virus, using their excellent sense of smell. So what about humans? Do we have such behaviours? Of course, we can vaccinate whole populations, initiate hand-washing campaigns, or promote the use of condoms. But these are intelligent behaviours, reliant on science and language and communication. Do we have primitive behaviours that perhaps evolved before we became so smart? Psychologists like Steven Pinker think so. He and many others consider the emotion disgust to be a behaviour that evolved in humans to prevent us ingesting parasites. As Pinker states, disgust is our intuitive microbiology, a way for us to avoid disease. The study of disgust got going with Darwin, who in his book On the Expressions of Emotions in Animals and Man in 1872 famously recounted how, in Tierra del Fuego, a native touched with his finger some cold preserved meat which I was eating at our bivouac, and plainly showed utter disgust at its softness, whilst I felt utter disgust at my food being touched by a naked savage, though his hands did not appear dirty. Experiments have shown how this feeling of disgust can be experimentally increased when test subjects are shown pictures of rotten meat compared to control pictures representing other dangers not related to infection, like sticking a knife in an electrical socket. The take-home message being that when we perceive the environment as being dangerous due to the presence of parasites, we ramp up our disgust emotion. And remember the pregnant sheep? Turns out pregnant humans can also increase disgust during the first trimester of pregnancy, which also functions to reduce infection. Other early human behaviors were also very effective, such as the use of spices, and in particular chili, which contains the antimicrobial agent capsaicin, which is known to kill food spoilage microbes like the fungus Fusarium. Of course, the most unique of all human behaviors that no other animal has yet evolved is cooking. And this is a great way to kill parasites. In our modern era of high-density city living, we need more than disgust, chilies, and cooking to keep us free of infectious disease. We need national and internationally coordinated medical communities based on the best and most recent science. But still, it is interesting and fun to think about behavior and what other animals do with this most flexible of tools when faced with disease.